What's up everyone? I'm Twisted. In this video I'm going to be diving into theories related to the newest cinematic, Twilight's End. This is a follow-up to my previous video where I went over all the details present in that cinematic, so I highly recommend you watch that first. Here we'll be diving into topics like: is Xin really dead? What was LeBlanc's plan? What's the deal with Zaahen's powers? The possibility of a Noxian Show? And what the first season of 2026 will be about. So if any of these sound interesting to you, make sure you watch this video until the end. Let's start with the question on everyone's minds. Did Xin really die, or is there a chance he can come back? Well, I'm very confident that Xin is gone for good. To me, Xin died the moment he was impaled by Atakhan, and his spirit turning into petals was just further confirmation of that. He sacrificed himself so that Zaahen could return and so that his power wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. But can he come back somehow? Of course, anything is possible, but not only would that undermine the weight of his and Zaahen's choices in this moment, but it would also reduce the impact of any future deaths or sacrifices, because if Xin can come back, so can any champion. So no, I don't believe Xin will return. With this being said, Xin being dead doesn't mean we'll never get more lore related to him, as we did get a novel about Ambessa's past after her death in Arcane. And of course, in League of Legends this doesn't mean anything, Xin can still get skins and stuff like that. Though Ambessa is probably not a good example here. Now that Xin is dead, it makes so much sense why his update takes place in the past. He still speaks about Jarvan III as if the latter was alive, his bio no longer mentions the Major Rebellion, and the Aftermath story was removed from his page. The Xin from the time of the Major Rebellion no longer exists. That part of the story is now non-canon, because Xin passed away years before it happened. To me the question shouldn't be if Xin really died, it should be, should he even have died? Was Xin the right champion for this story? Was this a satisfying retcon and ending to his character? It's still too early for me to answer this, but I'd love to know your thoughts down below. Now, follow-up question. Did Atakhan really die? To me this is an easy answer, yes it did. Defeating demons isn't a new concept, even Xin defeated a bunch this year. But in the world of Runeterra, spirits are never truly gone, especially evil spirits like demons. So for the cinematic to bring so much attention to Atakhan being undone, to the point of having a character say it out loud instead of just showing us, and this character being LeBlanc no less, who is very knowledgeable about demons and dark magics, I have no reason not to believe that Atakhan is truly gone for real. Rest in ruin. Staying on the topic of LeBlanc's line, let's discuss what her plan was. Throughout this year we learned that LeBlanc was interested in a Darkin weapon, but we never learned why. We always assumed she wanted to use it against Mordekaiser, but the ending of this cinematic suggests that Rom and Swain are the ones in her sight, at least right now. So was her plan all along to find a way to defeat Rom for good? Or was this just a lucky coincidence? As in, finding out a way to destroy demons was not something she planned, but something she was happy to find out anyway. Given all the pieces we have, I think it's safe to say that her plan was always to control the host of the Darkin weapon, that being her initial victim, and later Xin. She seems very excited when she finds out that the demon can be destroyed, but the way she phrases it at the end could also be interpreted as something that's new for her, and not just something that she was already trying to figure out. Though this can also be the case, of course. It's hard to say which of these is true, but I'm leaning more towards one of them. If she was indeed just trying to find a Darkin to defeat the demon for good, this might seem like a very convoluted way of doing it, one that doesn't end with the Darkin in her hands. But in true LeBlanc fashion, this was likely not the way she intended things to play out, and that's where Xin comes in. I do believe that it was her plan from the beginning to use him as a host, at least after Vladimir had Katarina kill the other guy she wanted to use. I believe that's why she was in Demacia. She must have been behind the seed that Xin finds, the one that becomes the Spirit Blossom tree that led him back to Ionia, and I think she gave him dark visions to lure him to grab the glaive, her plan being to control Xin once he wielded the weapon. However, she was probably not counting on Atakhan killing Xin. Xin fully surrendering to Zaahen, and Zaahen being so powerful, being able to shrug off Atakhan's influence and even killing it with ease. A reminder that LeBlanc probably never experienced the Darkin. It's very likely that she was only alive during the second reign of Mordekaiser, and not much earlier. To conclude, I think if she wasn't looking for the Darkin glaive to deal with Rom, then we would be closing this chapter without knowing what she actually wanted it for, which is pretty lame. So I think it makes sense, from a narrative perspective, to just assume that yes, her plan all along was to control the Arcane to kill Rom. One thing left unanswered was Atakhan's knowledge about Zaahen. How did the demon know about the location of the weapon? And how did LeBlanc know that the demon knew? I feel like this was an important detail left out of the story. In the past, I've speculated that maybe Zaahen was somehow involved in Xin Zhao's death, but given what we now know about his role in Ionia and how he was imprisoned, I think this was very unlikely. It's worth mentioning that Atakhan is a demon that feeds on bloodshed and violence, so maybe it was just attracted to Ionia during the Arcane War. How LeBlanc knows about this? I have no idea. Why Zaahen in specific and not any other Arcane? I also do not know. Obviously this was all for the sake of us having a new story to experience, but I can't help wanting to learn more. We also don't know exactly what brought back the Wyldbloom, the phenomenon that causes spirit blossom flowers to bloom outside of Ionia, the reason one of them bloomed in Demacia. One could assume that perhaps it was the events of Arcane, but that's just speculation. The Wyldbloom was also confirmed to have been responsible for bringing the Temple of Twilight back, so my question is, was LeBlanc behind all of this? It makes sense if she was, but how the hell did she do it? The Wyldbloom is something that the devs said over and over that we would learn more about, and we never did. Another thing left unanswered for now are Zaahen's powers. From what I've seen, he seems to be the first Ascended to be sealed inside a weapon that did not use blood magic. We just never see him using it, and unlike the Arcane he fights, he looks like a normal Ascended. And here I just wanna add that the Arcane are not separate species from the Ascended. Arcane is a specific term used for the Ascended who became, well, a bit insane after living for so many years and fighting so many wars, including against the horrors of the Void. They were basically gods, but their minds were still human, and human minds were not made to live so long and experience so much trauma. In universe, the term Arcane was given to them by mortals when they started using blood magic and conquering the world. So Arcane started more like an insult than a species or faction, one that in time they took for themselves. But since Zaahen was never one of these world-conquering Ascended, as far as we know, he likely never wielded blood magic, which again explains why he looks normal here. This means that Zaahen probably doesn't have the power to use flesh and blood to reshape himself, which could explain why his face is still Shin's. We do see these orange and red parts in him, but I'm not sure if these are tied to blood magic in specific. He did already have orange eyes after all. But yeah, I'll admit, without blood magic being involved, I can't really explain why his body changes the way it does. With this being said, I think the presence of gold magic, gold details and even gold references in his kit are important here. As we know, the power of the Ascended comes from the sun. Now, this would mean that, in theory, Zaahen is still using his Ascended powers. Maybe I shouldn't be overthinking this. Like, this post literally says that he wields both divine and profane powers. These should be the powers of the Ascended and the blood magic of the Arcane, right? I think this explains well why he still looks so much like Xin while still transforming his body. He wields blood magic, but he doesn't want to look like a monster. And this also explains why the devs decided to include so much gold in his design and abilities, but also some red as well. He wields both powers. Now, does this make sense in terms of lore? I don't really know anymore. Still on the topic of Zaahen's powers, let's go back to the ending of the cinematic. It's obvious that LeBlanc wants to stop Swain and Rom. And yes, as far as we know, Swain's lore remains completely unchanged. By the time these events take place, he already made a deal with Rom. One might assume that to stop them, LeBlanc needs an Ascended or their power. But truly, the powers of the Ascended come from the sun. And again, I am assuming Zaahen's powers here are his Ascended powers. So, grain of salt, I could be very wrong. Anyways, in the Mbessa novel, spoilers, we learn that the Black Rose is no stranger to sun magic. In the novel, one of the characters working for the Black Rose is able to channel sun magic and even bind it to runes. This character just so happens to be Rudo, Mel's biological father. Now, maybe LeBlanc was always suspicious that his magic could destroy demons, and that was one of the reasons Rudo worked for her, and also one of the reasons she later became interested in Mel. But it's also possible that this was all just a very convenient coincidence, that she's only now finding out about this, and that she was just after Mel because of the events of the novel. Either way, it's possible that LeBlanc will become more interested in Mel now that she knows Mel could be crucial in her plan against Swain. Perhaps Vladimir was right when he told LeBlanc that they should focus on Mel instead of the Arcane weapon.
Perhaps we should focus on the opportunity that's washed up on our shores.
Going back to Rudo, besides being a Black Rose member, he was also a Rakor, and this year we got two voice lines teasing a connection between the Noxii, the ancestors of the Noxians, and the tribes of Mount Targan. These never ended up being explored this year, which is a shame, but maybe they're saving it for the future. And since we're talking about Targan, I just want to quickly mention that the reference to the aspect of Twilight from the Warning comic ended up being just that. a reference. Going back to this scene at the end, I am now a bit more confident about what this is. But first, consider subscribing if you haven't already. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Anyways, I've seen a lot of people, myself included, say that this is a Noxian boat, but that answer never really satisfied me. It just feels too random, too disconnected. So far, all of these shapes have represented champions. If we go back to Welcome to Noxus, the first shape represents Mel, the second Katarina, the third is Darius, the fourth is Elise, and the final one ended up being Zaahen, who is also present in a Dark Gambit. And here in the new cinematic we see this shape, which obviously represents Swain. So it would make a lot of sense if this also represented a champion. After spending way too much time in Photoshop, I managed to find these two guys, mirroring each other. I believe this is Zaahen as a mortal and as an ascended. Together they form an even bigger Zaahen holding his glaive. For now, this is the best I got. I really don't want to spend more time looking at shapes. Please let me know what you think down below. And this is a good segue to the next topic, which is, where will Zaahen's story lead? Is LeBlanc planning to meddle with him again at some point? The teaser at the end might suggest that, but if I'm honest, I don't think that will happen. Following the lore we got for Zaahen at the time of me writing this video, we know that Zaahen wants to defeat the other Darkin, just like he was doing before being sealed. He's set up as being the one Darkin that is fighting against all of the trauma to stay sane and save the world from his brothers. And despite LeBlanc's interest in his power, I think their stories won't cross paths again so soon, and here's why. You see, while the lore of this year is a direct continuation of some of the narrative threads of Arcane, it's not exactly what you would call a sequel. This is more like a side story. If Riot ever makes an animated series on Noxus, fans of Arcane would not need to know everything that happened in League's lore in 2025 to be able to understand that show. The only relevant parts of this year they might need to know are Mel's arrival in Noxus and that LeBlanc might be plotting against the current Grand General. Those are the only narrative threads that a Noxian show would pick up on. The story of Yunara and the Kinku, and Zaahen and the Darkin, and even Demacia's future without Xin, now those are separate threads that can continue in other projects. Obviously I could be wrong, but I do think Riot is making these League seasons their own self-contained stories. Where yes, it would be awesome if Arcane fans came to the game to experience them, but Riot also doesn't want to alienate them by making super important narrative drops in a medium they are not interested in. I just don't see these threads being relevant in a Noxian show. Again, if this ever becomes a thing, I think the only important stuff from League this year will be Mel arriving in Noxus to uncover her mother's secret and to become the new leader of the Medarda, and LeBlanc plotting against Swain, looking for a way to permanently destroy the demon he made a deal with. Outside of League, this year we also got the Mbessa novel, which laid the groundwork for the future of both Rel and Mel. You can check out this video to learn more. But why am I even talking about a Noxian show? Well, leaks aside, Swain is obviously one of the most important characters in modern Noxian lore. LeBlanc was in Arcane and in Mbessa's novel, and the main antagonist of this year. Rel was a major character in the novel, and Mel is obviously just really popular because she was a main character in Arcane. So it wouldn't surprise me if all of these threads culminated in a project similar to Arcane as opposed to League of Legends seasons. But of course I could be very wrong here, and maybe Riot is going to continue this in the thematic season format. But for now, I do believe this was just a side story and that we won't see a direct sequel so soon. But if next year will not continue these threads, what can we expect? I'll give you a spoiler warning for leaks in a second, but first I want to go over my personal expectations for next year. Do keep in mind that a new devlog is coming out before the year ends, so this part might become outdated very soon. Anyways, like most people, I expect Season 1 of 2026 to take place in a new region that isn't Noxus or Ionia, assuming it won't be a skinline universe like Star Guardian or something. I believe this shift from one region to another will be similar to what happened between last year and this year. We jumped from Piltover and Zon to Noxus. Like I said, there were parts of the story that continued. Mel returned to Noxus following the ending of Arcane, and LeBlanc even mentions the events of the show. But neither Mel nor those events were relevant in the major storyline of this year. This was a continuation of the story in terms of timeline, but not a sequel. And I believe the same will happen next year. We might see some threads that tie back to this year's lore, but we won't see a direct sequel to these events. We could see something like the aftermath of Xin's death in Demacia, or we could see Zaahen meeting another Darkin, but that will only be a small part of the narrative. The same way we didn't stay on Mel for too long. What we'll most likely see is a brand new storyline, a brand new side story. Now, spoiler warning for leaks related to League of Legends content in 2026. You've probably seen them already, the leaks about a Demacian season. Honestly, I am a bit tired since we've been hearing about this for more than a year now, but it does seem to be finally happening. And if we are indeed jumping to Demacia, it's possible that Shyvana will somehow be involved. Her VGU was iceboxed following the last big wave of layoffs at Riot and their shift to thematic seasons. Riot Meddler said that they would only work on her again if they were working on a season that fit her well, something like a Demacian season or a Dragon season for example. It has been confirmed that we'll be learning more about her in the next devlog, where we'll likely also know the team of the next season. If the team is indeed Demacia, I see no reason for Shyvana to not finally get her VGU. Now, what are we going to see if we end up going to Demacia? Could it be the Mage Rebellion, Morgana and Kayle, Poppy? Who knows? But in my honest opinion, I think the most likely answer is a brand new storyline just like the one we saw this year. One that expands on stuff we already know, like the past of Noxus, retcons parts of the lore, like the Spirit Blossom Festival and Xin's death, and introduces brand new elements like the Darkin War in Ionia, and of course the story of Xin, Yunara and Zaahen. For now, this is what I expect for next year, completely new lore. But again, there's a devlog coming out very soon, so we'll learn more about this in no time. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Let me know down below if I missed anything, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. It's free and you can always change your mind later. I'm Twisted and I'll see you guys in the next video.